Welcome to True Paranormal, the podcast, with your host, Leo Rizzuti. Every week we will explore such topics as ghosts, demons, poltergeist, haunted history, time shifts, cryptozoology, and other aspects of the paranormal through listener-submitted accounts, documentary studies, and interviews with the investigators that dedicate their lives to searching for proof of the unknown. So get a fresh cup of coffee, dim the lights, relax, and get ready for a short visit to the realm of the true paranormal. Hey guys, Leo Rizzuti here. Welcome to another episode of True Paranormal, the podcast. This week I have left the friendly confines of Cleveland, Ohio, and have traveled back down to my home state of North Carolina, where the tea is sweet, the biscuits are yummy, and the weather's kind of hot and humid, but you can't have everything, right? I'm happy to have this week as my guest, a buddy of mine that we have known each other for close to 30 years, one of my dearest friends on this earth, Mr. Michael Nesbitt. Mike has lived in a lot of haunted locations, has been surrounded by paranormal activity for most of his adult life, and has a ton of stories to tell. So I figured it'd be great to sit down with Mike and just have a chat and let you guys enjoy some of his stories. Mike, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So I know early on in your life, you lived at a house that had some activity going on whenever you were a teenager.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was in Chapel Hill. It was an old house that we rented. And my uncle and grandfather decided to renovate and drywall and finish the attic to make it a bedroom for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the house used skeleton keys. It was uneven on its foundation, so not even all the doors shut or shut well on the interior of the house. And the door that led up to the attic, we didn't actually have a key for.
Right.
And so what we did was we used one of those old-fashioned cast iron irons that you used to stick on the wood stove.
Right, the ones that they feel like they weigh about 20 pounds.
Right, we use that for a door stop.
Okay.
To keep the door open,
Mm-hmm.
so it won't ever shut. And as you know, with most skeleton keys, on the inside of the house, you don't have the night latch, day latch thing. You only have lock it or unlock it with a key.
Right, you have the keyhole on each side.
Right. But the front door, you have little buttons you could push for like daytime or nighttime where you can open it from one side or not open it from one side.
Right.
Anyway, my mother and my little brother, I wasn't at the house at the time, but they were upstairs in the attic, and somehow the door slammed shut.
It just slammed shut.
Yeah, and locked.
Now, this was the door that was propped open with this heavy iron.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So how could that happen? How could the iron got moved?
I have no idea because I wasn't actually there. I was just told by everybody what happened. And they were stuck up there for hours.
Wow.
And they had to call my uncle and my grandfather to come over there. And they actually had to remove the door from the hinges in order to get them out. Because they couldn't get the door open.
Wow, that's incredible. So not only did the door close on its own with enough force that it locked somehow.
Yeah.
Or it got jammed to the point where they had to remove the hinges to remove the door. But the door stop, which these little iron things, they're heavy. I mean, you can pull a muscle picking them up.
I bet they're at least a good 5 to 10 pounds.
Right. They're not the kind of thing that you just kick to the side.
Right.
So whatever it was that occurred in there was strong enough to move that weight and then slam the door.
Right.
Wow.
And when the door was open and wedged with the thing, it was flat against the wall, the outside wall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it had to go a full 180 to shut. It wasn't like it was partially open with the thing. It didn't have spring hinges. It was open all the way to the wall flat with the iron in front of it.
Wow. And it's not like anything where like a breeze could obviously blow it closed or anything like that.
No. And then another time at the same house, my mother and brother came home and they thought they saw somebody standing upstairs in the window of the attic looking out towards the driveway at them as they were coming in the yard.
In the same room where the door had closed.
Right.
Was this before the door had closed, or was this afterwards?
I do not recall.
Okay.
Because it's been about 33 years
since
that happened. But yeah, I do remember that I often had an uneasy feeling, and there were many nights I wouldn't sleep up there.
Right. Yeah, you told me you ended up not wanting to sleep in your own room.
Right. I would sleep on the couch a lot downstairs, or spend the night at my grandfather's. I did not sleep a whole lot of nights up there. I didn't spend a whole lot of time up there at all.
Right.
I would just go up there. I mean, I would go up there, do stuff, but I wouldn't. I remember I wouldn't hang out up there.
Did you feel like you were being watched or anything like that up there, or was it?
I just had a feeling. Just I had a feeling. You know, just a feeling of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like the time in the mental institution.
And I want to get into that, maybe not on this episode, but I wanted to talk to you about that at a different time. Okay. Actually, we can go. Let's hear about that, because I'm really interested in Rob and I. We've got a friend of ours that we're at his house, Rob Fagolsky, where we were talking about your experiences at Holly Hill, right? Where you were working as a part-time security guard, something like that, right?
Yes.
So what happened there? Because that to me was really fascinating. I remember when you guys were talking about this happening.
Yeah, I had a couple things happen there. Mm-hmm. We were working temporarily as security guards because they had a fire. Right. And the doors wouldn't lock. So we were just there basically to watch and make sure none of the patients walked out. Okay. Okay. Now, most of the people there, it was mixed wards.
What do you mean by mixed wards?
Well, not everybody there necessarily had a mental issue. Mm-hmm. There were a few people there that might have substance abuse, but they were in the same place.
Okay, so it's not like you have people who are institutionalized there, right? And it's all those kind of people. You've got a good mix of different levels of people who needed help. Right,
and I still have to hold some things out because of HIPAA.
Of course,
I still have that confidentiality thing I signed.
Absolutely.
But anyway, the upstairs was for the adults. Mm-hmm. The downstairs was juveniles.
Okay.
Okay. And we essentially sat at the nurse's station.
Okay.
And at the nurse's station, they have closed circuit televisions for the cameras around the building. And behind us, they have what's called the quiet room, which is basically the padded room.
Okay.
Okay. In case somebody's really having a hard day.
Right.
All right. So they didn't have any limits on how many hours we could work. So we would work until we just could not function anymore.
Right. You worked until you're just like, I'm done. I can't be here.
Right. And then I would go home and he would come and he would take his turn.
Right.
So after a few days of this, we were getting pretty sleep deprived.
Right. I would imagine so.
Okay. To the point where the nurse said, you're becoming psychotic. Because I was mumbling and talking to myself and kind of hallucinating a little bit from no sleep.
Right.
Which is normal. It's a normal thing.
Right. You would imagine that, especially if you're in an environment where you're not getting a whole lot of stimulus into you, your brain would try to create stimuli.
Right. I was so tired. Mm-hmm. So she goes, if you want to just go take a nap for a little while, you could go down to the other ward, the vacant ward. And the areas we were in that we were familiar with, they had individual patient rooms, right? With like a day room.
Right.
So I asked her where it was, and I went down there, and I opened the door, and I turned on the light, and it was one big room with beds, and the lights just went on one and another all the way down, and it just kind of looked like The Shining or like something out of the Matrix or something, but straight out of a horror movie. The lights all went on one at a time, and it was like 50 beds all together
like an open barracks, like you would have. But you're talking about the lights laddering down, chunk, chunk, chunk.
All the way down, right?
Right.
And
that's the perfect environment that you want to get a nice relaxing nap in.
Right, in a mental hospital, right? And so I looked at it, and I took a half a step, and then I just knew, you don't go in there. Just don't go in there.
Right.
I just had the worst feeling about that room, and I said, this isn't happening. And I turned off the light and I left.
Right.
But then I was working on Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a very unusual experience. We had a kid downstairs who claimed to be a Satanist.
Okay.
And he would tell people he was very gothic. He always dressed in black nails, black everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he told people that he was going to summon demons, and that he worshipped the purple god. And then he said he was actually going to summon Satan.
Oh, well, that's exactly what you want to hear.
Right. Now, I didn't hear all that because I was upstairs with the adults.
Right.
But it was coming up to the people
in the
nursing station. It was filtering up from the employees. Okay. So we had that going on. Then we had this other guy, and he reminded us of Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And he could speak French, but his family said he never took French.
What?
Yeah, he thought he was a Frenchman from the 1800s.
Wow, so he was he thought he was channeling a previous life.
He thought he was that person.
Okay. Oh.
He thought he was this 1800s or 18th century Frenchman named Genet.
Did he think that this time period was that time period?
As far as I can remember, he didn't. He just thought he was that person, and he spoke French.
Mm-hmm.
But he also kind of reminded me of Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest because the guy was gigantic.
Right.
But he didn't lift. He was just big.
Right.
And he would sit down in the day room when they were eating, and he would take something off of somebody's tray, and I remember they wouldn't mess with him.
No, they would
just let him eat what he wants.
Right. Whatever you want, man.
Right. Kind of like that. Was a Richard Pryor movie where they sit down and they had the real big white guy, and he just takes food off of everybody's tray.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, I was working there on Halloween, and the adult patients upstairs decided they're going to have a seance.
Okay, lovely.
Okay, so they're having a seance, and then we start getting phone calls from downstairs, and the gothic kid. They had put him in the quiet room of 4-point restraints.
Wow.
Okay? Because he was acting up.
Right.
He was acting very strange. And the nurses from downstairs were calling upstairs and telling us what was going on. And we could see him on the camera laying on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
They lay you on the floor on your back, spread eagle.
Right.
Strapped down.
Right. So you can't move.
Right.
Really at all.
And then you had the little observation window where they can look in on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
So, but when you're laying down there on the floor, you obviously aren't going to be able to see out the window.
No, not at all.
Okay? So, people were walking by his room, and he knew who they were. He knew their names.
What?
Right. He would call out their names and stuff. And they turned on the microphone, and you could hear, and you started making animal noises, and all those kind of stuff that you saw in The Exorcist, right?
Right.
Making these noises and all this stuff. And his face started to distort a little bit and change. And then the most unusual, and at the same time, this is all going on. They got Genet in the quiet room behind me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And he's just walking around, mumbling something in French, doing racetrack patterns in the quiet room, holding his fingers up like a cross in front of him, just like this. While this guy's downstairs doing all this
transformation
stuff or whatever he's doing,
channeling whatever he could have done,
while the seance is going on in the day room. So all these three things are happening at the same time, and it's close to midnight on Halloween.
Right.
Right. And the thing I will always remember is, you know what it looks like when a snake eats?
Yes.
You know how they have that big lump that goes down their throat?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. It looked like he had been a snake that had swallowed not a peewee football, but a football that's about the size of a 6-inch sub, or maybe a little bit bigger.
Like kind of like a mini Nerf football.
Yes.
But maybe a little bigger.
Maybe bigger,
Right.
right? And that's what his throat looked like.
Wow.
That's how big his throat was. So it looked like he had swallowed like I would say if you took a foot-long Subway sub and cut it in half and then stacked the two pieces on top of each other. That's what it looked like.
Wow.
Right? And his face was so different looking than normal.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I said, I'm going home.
Yeah,
so I left.
That's call it a daytime, right?
Yeah, so I left. So I don't know what happened after that.
Right.
I just know that going into it, the kid had said this is going to happen, and stuff happened.
And pretty much what he said was going to happen.
Right.
Well, it happened.
Yeah.
That's an incredible story. And I knew a little bit of the details. I knew that you guys had seen some weird things there, but I'd never actually heard all the details of that.
So that was that one event, and then the one event where I just did not want to go in that one room.
Right. And I've been in rooms like that doing investigations where you take one step into it and you're like, no, I cannot be in here for whatever reason. And maybe you go back an hour later and it's fine. But in that moment, no, there's just no freaking way. Whew, that's cool. Oh man. So then let's jump forward a few years.
Okay.
Because I want to hear about I know you had some episodes with sleep paralysis.
Yes, I have one.
One. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about that, because that's something that we hear a lot of at True Paranormal. We get a lot of folks that experience sleep paralysis, and sometimes it's obvious that it's just a physical reaction. Nobody really understands what sleep paralysis is, why your body does what it does. There's a lot of theories out there, but I think your episode with it is unique in that, well, I'll let you tell the story, but it's not the typical I woke up and I couldn't move type of sleep paralysis, and you couldn't see anything around you. You were actually wide awake, I believe.
Yes. I will give a couple of disclaimers.
Okay.
Okay. I'm not saying that this is exactly what happened. This is the background leading into it and the theory, but it could very well be incorrect.
Right.
Okay. My mother was a very spiritual person, and she had claimed that there was a negative entity trying to attach itself to the house.
Okay.
And I've always heard somebody walking around on the roof. Not the attic, the roof. You know what it sounds like when someone's up there cleaning gutters.
Right.
Just walking around.
And it was just a regular asphalt shingle roof.
Yeah. Right. Just normal asphalt shingle roof. And it always, all the time, sounded like somebody was walking around up there. Like multiple times a week. Like somebody was walking around the roof.
Right. To the point where it stops being scary and starts being annoying.
Yeah. And it wasn't like it was ever scary. But she said she had claimed that it was this negative entity trying to get permission or access to the house. It couldn't get access to the house.
Right.
So it was just like hanging around.
Right. And I knew your mom. Your mom had a lot of, as you said, she's a very spiritual lady. She had a lot of gifts, and she could, according to her, see things that other people couldn't see.
Right, according to her.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one night I fell asleep watching The Shining.
Right, which is the only movie that I'm actually scared of. It's the only scary movie where I was like, yes, this is a horror movie.
Right, I fell asleep watching The Shining, or The Shining came on while I was asleep, or something like that. Right? And she came down screaming and yelling, "What do you have on in my house?" Because stuff started affecting her sensitivities.
Right.
She woke me up in the middle of sleep. I was just asleep on the couch.
Right.
So, and I was 21, 23 at the time, something like that.
Right.
So that was the second incident in that particular house.
Mm-hmm.
Then one night I was asleep, and I went to sleep with the lights on.
Right.
And I was actually sleeping on the floor because the bed was too soft. And I woke up because I heard something hissing at me. And when I woke up, I couldn't move. I felt something on my chest, but I couldn't move.
You felt something like something was sitting on your chest.
Right. I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. But I could look over. I could see the lamp. I could look over here. I could see the dresser.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
I couldn't reach the dresser. I couldn't move. But I could see it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was starting to bother me because I knew that there was something there.
Right. And it didn't just go away. It wasn't.
Right. And I will say that I'm not a practicing Christian at this time. But I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't get help. I couldn't do anything. But had this thing, all I can say is a hissing noise. I can't explain exactly what the noise was, but you know.
Right, but you were actively hearing this noise.
Yes.
It wasn't I heard it one time and I didn't hear it, but you were actively hearing this noise.
Right. And so the only thing I could think to do at that time was to pray. Okay. Well, I couldn't get words out. Right. So, and nothing was happening. And this went on for a while, like 5 minutes at least. And the craziest thing is I got out the word Jesus. And as soon as I got that out, everything stopped.
No way.
Instantaneous. As soon as it got out, as soon as I actually could make my mouth move and get it out. But I was struggling to make words for a while. But once it came out,
everything cleared up.
It was done.
Wow.
Instantaneous.
And see, that's where I think your story is unique in that you actually had a trigger that stopped it.
Yeah.
You actually did something. And I've often talked about visualization with if you feel like you're being attacked by a negative entity, you visualize, in my opinion, as a Christian, you visualize the light of Christ coming out of you, things like that, and it helps. What you did is kind of the same thing where you spoke that one word and it stopped, which to me says, okay, this is not a biological thing that's happening to you. This is not any kind of physical anomaly. This is you being attacked in that moment.
It seemed like it because of the other things that happened and the other hissing event with the shining that woke up my mother.
Right, exactly. So you had previous, not the exact same type of thing, but you had enough similarities to where you could tie those two together.
Yes, and I know I was awake during the entire thing. I mean, I was completely 100% awake. The lights were on. I could see everything in the room. I was there. I was awake.
It's, that's the kind of situation I tell people is just, it's good that you handled it the way you did, because not that anything really horrifying would have happened to you, but the longer you're in that state, the easier it is for something to attack you also later on.
Right.
It weakens your defenses against it each time. And you knew how to handle it. You knew to the best of your knowledge, this is how I can get out of this. And whatever you did worked. So yay.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, let's jump forward a few years. And you were telling me about this house that you lived in.
Yes.
This is after you were married. And this is one of the most active houses I think I've ever heard personal accounts from. I've been in haunting investigations with houses that might be more active, but not as many personal experiences as what you have had in this house that we're going to talk about. It's just it's a wild. You guys are going to enjoy hearing about this, and it's Mike has a couple of different theories as to what could have caused it, but they're all theories. So, but if you could tell us about this house, tell us about the house, describe it, and then what all happened in there.
All right. The house was my confirmation event. Everything else that happened up until this point throughout my life, I could still there was still a plausible explanation.
Right.
There was a possibility of it just being something else.
Right. You could say, well, yes, I experienced this, but there was always in the back of your mind, okay, maybe something non-paranormal caused this.
Right.
Right.
But the house was different. We built it.
Mm-hmm. So all new construction.
Right. And all 5 family members experienced things in the house.
Right. So you were married.
Right. And I had 3 children.
Okay. How old were the kids at the beginning? Because I know this spans several years.
At the beginning, it was just one child, and he was in 6th grade.
Okay. So
He's now 28.
Right. So he was about 12 years old?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And then it expanded all the way through to my youngest, who moved out of the house when he was 3 or 4.
Okay.
Okay. So, who's now going to turn 14.
Okay. So we're talking about a window of probably, 4, 5, 6 years?
No, we're talking about a window of 10 years.
Okay.
They were in the house 10 years.
Okay.
Okay. At least. So, built this house. Didn't have any real issues with it. The floors creaked upstairs from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it was.
Right.
And to describe the house, it's a 2-story, 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And the stairwell has about 4 stairs and then like a little landing, and then you turn the corner and you go up about 4 or 5 more stairs.
Right.
But it's open from the landing to the top, about 15, 20 feet.
Right. So you're not enclosed by walls all the way up.
No. At the top of the stairs, there's like a little 4-foot wall that keeps people from falling down the hole.
Right.
Okay. So that's on 2 sides with a little opening where the stairs are that walks up. And there's no doors.
Okay.
Okay. So if you get to the landing, you can see if somebody's up there.
Mm-hmm. You can see everything.
Right. If they're on the long part of the hallway, you can see them. If they're on the short part of the hallway where the washer dryer is, you can see them.
Right.
So my personal theory, which is not substantiated, or have I heard any investigators say this before, it's just my personal theory. I was watching a show called Scariest Places on Earth.
Right. I'm familiar with the show. It was a great show. I don't know if they're still playing it or not. They still have it in syndication, but I remember that show for sure.
Well, the challenge was they had to spend the night. These 2 families had to spend the night in this castle in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
That was supposed to be extremely haunted.
Right.
And at the beginning of the show, they did this ancient, either Celtic or Druid ritual that's supposed to open a spirit portal so you could get even more activity in the place.
Because that's what you want.
Right. So they did this ritual,
mm-hmm.
and they said it in completion.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is before the show ended, they never said the closing ritual to close the gate.
So they left it open.
Right. Before the show was over. Now, I don't know what they did after that, but that's what was edited.
Right.
But it played through my speakers, so the words were actually uttered in my house.
Right. Right. Which is not even one step, it's a half a step removed from them doing the ritual in your house.
Right. Which I wouldn't have thought would be an issue. But as soon as I turned off the TV, within 3 to 5 minutes is when all the activity started.
Prior to that, you hadn't really had any activity at all.
I had not noticed a thing.
Right.
Okay.
And how long had you been in the house at that point?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. At least a year, probably.
Okay, so it wasn't like you had moved in 2 weeks before and hadn't seen anything. You had been there for a while.
Yeah, because we moved in June, and this was a Halloween, so it was either the first Halloween, but I think it was more like the second or third Halloween.
Right, but you'd been in there at least.
Because, I think it was at least the second or third Halloween. So, as soon as it was over, I'm laying in the bed, and from the foot of my bed to the bedroom door is maybe 10 feet.
Okay.
Because from the end of the king-size bed to the wall I mean, it had enough room to walk in between the dresser, and that's about it, right?
Right. And this is the master bedroom upstairs.
Yes.
Right.
All the bedrooms were upstairs.
Okay.
So, for some reason, the two younger children always slept in the master bedroom. They never slept in their bedrooms. Right? They had like beds in there.
Right.
And my oldest slept at the far end of the hallway over the garage.
Okay.
Okay. But, so within a few minutes of this happening, I'm laying in bed. I can see out the bedroom door. The hall bath is immediately outside the bathroom door. And then the next door next to that is one of the bedrooms. So I can see down the hallway a good 3 to 5 feet.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I can hear something pacing back and forth in front of the door because the floor is creaking.
In front of the open door.
Yes, the open door, like it's looking in at me.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to give a visual representation for your audience, if you remember the Star Wars movie where Darth Maul is fighting the two Jedi guys and he gets caught in between the two force fields,
and he's pacing back and forth.
He's pacing back and forth looking at them. That's exactly what it felt like. There's something there walking back and forth looking at me.
Right.
And that's a perfect.
Did you feel like malice coming in towards you, or
I don't know if I felt malice, but I just knew that there was something there looking at me.
Right.
And it's walking back and forth.
And you could actually hear it walking back and forth.
Oh,
right.
Easily. Yeah. The floor was creaking,
Right.
Just like somebody normal.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was weird. But you know what? I just sort of blew it off.
Right.
But
it helps that you'd had so many experiences in your life before that to where it kind of almost calloused you towards it, though.
Yeah. So I sat there and I didn't think much of it, but then things kept happening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like I would be downstairs late at night and I would hear somebody walking around that area of the hallway.
The same area.
Yeah. And then the next morning, my mother-in-law was visiting one time. I said, "Hey, were you up last night doing laundry or going to the bathroom?" And she said no, because she would stay in that front bedroom.
Right.
That's on the short hall.
Right.
Okay. And so I would hear footsteps all the time. And the children, when they were little, they would all the time look up all of a sudden in the corner and just stare.
Right.
And talk, at the corner.
Talk to the corner.
Yeah. Making baby sounds, but they're trying to talk.
Right, they're trying to communicate.
I can see them looking at stuff. I mean, they're looking at something.
Yeah, and that's always impressed me that, that's really small children and pets, animals. It's almost like they sense things and they can see things that we just can't see. And we've talked about this before, where my theory is that, especially with children, they're so young, they haven't had the time for the world to tell them these things aren't real, that they don't have a filter on there that allows their brain to say, yes, we know what you're seeing, but you're not really seeing anything. So they just accept that something's there. And like you said, they try to communicate with it because it could appear as a child to them. It could appear as a person. It could appear as an animal, as whatever. They're going to try to communicate with it.
So that would happen. Footsteps all the time. I mean, I'd hear something walk around upstairs while everybody's asleep, because I would stay up later than everybody else.
Right.
I remember one time I was doing dishes at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Okay.
And I've always, and I mean to this day, I almost always wake up at 3 in the morning. I mean, almost every night I wake up at 3.
Which is creepy in its own right.
Right. But I do. So I was down there doing dishes at 2 or 3 in the morning. And all of a sudden all my hair stood up on my head, on my arms, and I got chills. And I looked back behind me, and this black mass shadow moved from my 7 o'clock, and I turned my head towards it, across the opening to the living room, and then across the sliding glass door, but it blocked out the outside, so it was solid enough that it kind of blocked out the outside.
Right. You could still see through it.
A little bit, yes.
But it was definitely, it wasn't like a shadow, like if you wave your hand over something, you see a shadow. This was a mass.
Right. It was more than opaque. It was darker than opaque.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like probably 25% transparent.
Okay.
Okay. And it moved across the sliding glass door and then just sort of disappeared into the corner of the kitchen.
So you're saying it kind of like melted into the wall?
It just sort of like went into it. And that's it.
Wow. Wow.
And that's it. But it went from the floor to the ceiling.
Right. So
it was like 8 or 9 feet high, and then it just I don't know if I can describe it. Kind of like right when it got to the corner, it got smaller and just disappeared.
Right. So you're not talking about something that's, I mean, I guess it could be human size. There are humans that are.
No. It blocked out, like, it's a sliding glass door, so it's the size of.
So you're talking about 3 feet wide, or actually.
No, it's the size of that opening there at least.
So 6 or 7 feet wide minimum.
Yeah.
No.
And the ceiling, we had 8-9 foot ceilings in the kitchen.
Right. Then when it got to the corner, it just kind of shrunk into the corner.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it was fast when it did that transition. I mean, it moved kind of fast across because the whole thing only took a couple seconds.
Right. And I've seen things like that go across rooms, nothing that big, but I've seen it go across rooms and go melt into a wall. What it sounds like you're talking about is almost like it went into like an energy doorway, into like a vortex that swallowed it up. Is only
right.
That's how I'm visualizing.
Right. And I had all the lights on in the kitchen at the time, so it's not like something could. It was like it was a car or anything else.
Right.
So it was that was unusual.
That would not have been my first thought. That was very unusual.
It was crazy, yeah. But when I combined the feeling that I got that made me turn around and look.
Mm-hmm.
One without the other for me is more explanational. But when you have multiple events coinciding at the same time, it kind of narrows things down for me.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think most people in that situation, that would be the end of it for them in that house. They would be like, okay, I'm freaking done. It wasn't the case with you.
No, that wasn't the end. And I can't remember when we started bringing in priests to cleanse the house, but we had them in 2 or 3 times.
What would happen with that?
Everything would stop for about 6 months.
Right, so it worked, but only on a temporary basis.
Right, and then it would all come back.
So why do you think?
And that wasn't we had them come in for 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would tell it to get out all the time.
Right.
And that would last that would also last sometimes 3 to 6 months.
Right.
When I was kicking it out.
Right.
Because we put crucifixes over all the doorways.
Mm-hmm.
We put oil on all the doorways.
Right.
We did all sorts of stuff.
You did.
We put as much barrier up as we could.
Right. You did pretty much everything that most people would recommend in your situation.
Right.
So why do you think these entities kept coming back? Because most of the time, if you do what you guys did, that would solve it.
I don't know. But it went on the entire time, from the time that show went on until they moved out, stuff was happening.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
So, another event, I came home from work, walked upstairs. I got that little 4-foot wall. The hallway is maybe 15 to 20 feet. Mm-hmm. I know that the audience can't see it, but you can. So the hallway upstairs is about from here to the top of the kitchen stairs there.
Right. So yeah.
Or maybe no further than the front of the refrigerator.
Okay, so 20 28 feet max.
Yeah, something like that. 20 to 30 feet.
Right.
Upstairs. And I'm standing there going through the mail and just sitting it on top of the wall.
Mm-hmm. Typical, I'm come home for the day activity.
Down at the end of the hall, I see what I could swear is my 4-year-old or 5-year-old at the time tiptoe across the door and get behind it to hide.
Right. Which, typical 4 or 5-year-old playful behavior, I'm going to scare daddy.
Right. Now, that is my oldest boy's bedroom. It's over the garage. The front part that faces the street is a small walk-in attic.
Okay.
The door to the attic opens from left to right, out.
Mm-hmm.
His door opens from...
Well, left to right in.
Yes, in, so that the doorknobs would actually touch.
Right, so they jam up against each other. You had to close one to open the other one.
Right. And then the attic door had like a lot of extra insulation. It had one of those sweeps on it to try to keep the wind out.
Mm-hmm.
So I see him sneak across the door, and I laugh to myself. And I think, well, I'm going to sneak up on him. I'm going to turn the table on him. So I tiptoe all the way down the hallway, as quiet as I can, and I reach out real slow, and I grab the doorknob, and I yank it back, and I yell, "Ha!" And there's nobody there.
Of course there's not.
Nobody there.
Now, I've been giving this some thought because, I've had encounters with child spirits, things like that. One thing I noticed in your experiences, because you did have the black mass and because of the other activity that you had, negative entities, as you know, can take multiple forms. Have you ever thought about that was actually another form of the black mass, but it was taking that form at that time?
My personal guess is that we had more than one entity in the house.
And that's also a very strong possibility.
I think we had a child entity because we lost a child while we were living in the house.
Right.
But we had the black mass. We had some mood swings in the house. And then my oldest woke up with scratches all over him one time.
Well, tell us about that, because that's fascinating to me.
Right. So he didn't realize he was scratched. He woke up, got in the shower, and everything starts stinging all over his body.
Right.
Right. And he gets out and he looks at it and he comes and shows us.
Now, he's sleeping in the same room where you had this child entity disappear.
Right.
Okay.
Same room with the child entity. And other strange, a very unusual occurrence happened in there that I'll get to after this.
Okay.
2 more, at least. But one of them could be just a coincidence.
Right.
Anyway, he came and showed us. And again, this is very hard to explain just verbally. But if anybody's ever been scratched by a cat, you know that at least that really thin, just like thin line, and it kind of jumps.
Right. Looks like sporadic, almost puncture marks.
Right. So like you'll have like a solid piece of scab, and then it like jumps, and then maybe a little bit like that, and they welt up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, he was 5'9", and he had one that went from his left collarbone down to his left hip flexor.
Wow.
And then another one that kind of made like an upside down cross that went from his left rib all the way across his chest to his right rib. Wow. Then he had one that went across his throat from jugular to jugular.
What?
Yeah. He had two more diagonal ones across his stomach.
Right. That
were probably 3 inches long each. He had probably another 15 or 20 scratches on him on his torso that were short, like an inch, half inch, quarter inch, something like that. But he had one that ran he had at least 2 that ran a good 2 feet.
Right. That does not sound like the kind of scratches that could have been self-inflicted.
I would think that if he did it himself, he would have woken up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Secondly, his nails weren't sharp.
Right. And you guys didn't have any indoor pets at the time?
No pets at all.
Right.
Okay. The third problem with him doing it himself is that he would have to have distorted his fingernail, his hand, in a very unnatural position in order to make the scratch.
Right.
Because the way the line was orientated, it would just not natural.
Right. It would have been extremely awkward to try.
And who's going to scratch in the middle of the night with just one finger like this and not go like this, right?
Right. If you have an itch, if you have a bug laying on you or something, you go to scratch at it, you're going to use all your fingers. Right.
It was a distinctive one line. Right. It wasn't like two right next to each other. It was one here, one a few inches away over here. This one goes from here to here. This one goes from here to here. This one goes like this.
Right. So it also sounds like you're describing something that these couldn't have happened in one instant. This had to have been over a period of maybe the entire night these happened.
Yeah, but he
didn't notice them when he first got up. He just noticed it when he got in the shower.
Right, because they were so fine that he didn't notice them.
Right.
Until they started stinging.
And that describes the way when people get attacked with scratches, that's exactly how it normally happens. Is you won't really see anything. You'll see a kind of a reddish area. You'll feel a little bit of burning, but then it'll welt up and it'll show itself after the fact. You won't notice it when you actually get scratched. It'll be right afterwards.
Now, another very unusual occurrence in his room that could be explained away, but it's highly unusual. In North Carolina, we have black widows.
Yep.
Okay. But you don't ever find them inside.
No. If you find them inside, it's because they crawled in from your crawl space. Something like that.
Right. But they typically like to get in flower pots. Mm-hmm. They like to get in ladders. They like to stay low to the ground. Mm-hmm. That's the way they nest. They nest around the electrical boxes for utilities.
Yep.
They'll be inside your cable box, outside in the yard. They like to get in the water meter, but they don't build webs up in trees. They don't build webs up in bushes.
Right.
They like to be low to ground.
Exactly.
Okay. So he was sitting in his room playing a video game, and one came down on a single strand, just like in the Spider-Man movie, right beside him. And he's on the second floor. That's very unusual.
I have lived in North Carolina most of my life, and I have never, ever seen that from a black widow.
That's very unusual.
Yes.
Now, could it just have happened?
I mean, it's possible.
Possible,
sure.
Right?
I would never say that's impossible.
We had them in the yard, but I never saw one more than 4 inches off the ground.
No. I think the highest I've ever seen one might have been 2.5 feet off the ground, but it was inside of like a TV box or something like that.
Right. So that was just strange. So that happened. Then we had there was a night I was having a knockdown drag out fight with my wife at the time. Mm-hmm. And we're standing at the bottom of the stairs, underneath where we always hear all this walking.
Right.
And
so you guys are on the first floor.
First floor, right at the bottom, right at the mouth of the stairs, literally at the mouth of the stairs. Mm-hmm. And our youngest was upstairs on our king size bed, surrounded by pillows.
Okay.
He was an infant, and everybody knows the sound of a baby that's fallen out of the bed.
Right. If you're a parent, it's a sickening sound. Funk.
Right. So we're sitting there having this terrible, terrible fight. I mean, and she is just really beyond her normal self. Mm-hmm. And we hear that crash. Mm. So instantly the fight's over, our eyes get big, and I start tearing up the stairs.
Right.
Okay? As I hit the first step with my foot, because I'm already there, literally all I got to do is just pivot and put my foot up, and I'm on the first step.
Right.
I start hearing running down the hallway towards my oldest room. The same room where I saw the child sneak across the door and all the other stuff.
You hear running coming out of your room.
Running from that first area where I heard the pacing out in the hallway, down the hallway really fast. Now, I'm running as fast as it is, and it's I get to the landing as it's passing the landing. Right?
Right.
And if people remember, I can see all the way to the ceiling, and the wall is only 3 or 4 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
So it's waist high, just to keep people from falling down. Maybe just above, I'm 6 feet tall, so it's just above my abdomen.
Right, right.
Right? So there's footsteps running down the hall, but there's nobody there. Okay?
Right.
And we both heard them, and we both running upstairs. So my first thought is, well, maybe our teenager was up on top of the wall, trying to lean over and look at us and listen in.
Maybe.
Right?
Right.
And then he slipped and jumped down.
Right. Which would make that thunk sound.
Which would make the thunk sound, and then he would have thought, well, I better get back in bed, or I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. So maybe he's trying to run down the hall.
Right.
Now, again, he was 5'9", so it's unlikely that he could have ran that fast and bent under the wall.
Right, right. He'd have to low run at a fast pace, which is difficult at best to do.
So, but just in case, I went in his room and he was asleep, and I checked his pulse on his neck, and it seemed perfectly calm. So he seemed asleep to me.
Right, right.
Okay, he wasn't breathing hard.
So you're pretty sure it wasn't him?
I'm pretty sure it wasn't him.
Right.
Okay. So that's another event that happened there. My children to this day, my younger two, talk about the eyes. They would see eyes.
The eyes.
Right. Now, I don't remember exactly what the context was. I think they were looking under a bed one time, they saw eyes, or they're looking in a closet one time for something, they saw eyes.
And again, you guys didn't have pets.
No. And they remember those eyes. They still talk about those eyes.
Enough of an impact that years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
They still remember it. So
what ended up happening with the house? I know you're not there, obviously.
Anymore. No, it's gone.
Right.
It's been sold.
Right.
And I haven't been back since.
Do you know if anybody that's lived in there afterwards had any kind of
I have not asked anybody. I just let it go.
It'd be interesting to find out, but then also you wonder if, again, because you've had so much activity around you, if the activity, I don't want to say it's drawn to you, but that if you not being there caused activity to stop, or your family, because a lot of times these entities will feed off of energy, and they look for energy like family specifically, because you have a mix. You have you, and you have your wife, and you have the children, and you're a high energy guy, your wife's a high energy person, and your kids, obviously being kids, are high energy, so there's a lot of energy to draw off of. So
they've had 2 events at their new house.
Oh, they have?
Yes.
Okay.
That the children told me about.
Wow.
Again, there was a big argument.
Right.
Happening. And closet door opened during the argument.
See, now you wonder if the arguments, if the strife is caused by the entities.
I think one of them personally is attached to my ex.
Which that happens. People have things that get attached to them, that follow them around. And through no fault of their own. It's not like they're inviting this stuff in. It just gets attached to them.
So that happened, and then my 13-year-old told me a few months ago that his bedroom door opened while he was doing homework.
Mm.
He thought it was his older brother,
right,
messing with him,
but nobody there,
and trying to irritate him, right?
Which is what older brothers are for,
right? And so he jerked the door back, and his older brother was downstairs in the living room.
Wow.
So
the saga continues.
Yeah, not that much.
Not to the extent.
Not anything like before. Like before, like I said, we had the priest come in 3 times, and we probably kicked the entities out a good 6 or 7 times, maybe 8 times.
Well, I got to tell you, man, the stories you have for that house are incredible. The stories you have for your entire life are absolutely incredible. I'm glad that you guys got out of that house. It doesn't sound like I'm sure it was a beautiful house and everything, but it doesn't sound like the most pleasant situation.
Well, like I said, the only negative thing I ever really experienced was when he got scratched.
Right.
That's one thing. Everything else was just noises.
Right. But at that point, it sounds like it was escalating.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, how long after that happened was it before you guys got out of there? Do you remember?
No. Over a year.
Okay, so it wasn't like 2 months later you guys.
Yeah, over a year. It was over a year or two after he got scratched before I left the house because we separated, and they were still in the house after that.
Right.
So, there was never anything worse after that.
Right. That was the pinnacle.
The pinnacle event of any negative thing. Everything else was just noises. Like I said, the hide and seek event that one time. Maybe every now and then stuff will go missing. Right.
That's pretty common.
And you could have sworn it was right there, there. It was just there.
Yeah, we've had that happen. We've had a candle that was on our coffee table in the living room. We walk out of the room, we come back, and it's gone. And it shows up a week later downstairs in the basement on the washing machine. So that happens in homes.
Yes, I've been in a home where the car keys wound up in the freezer. The car keys wound up in another unusual place. The second one's a possible explanation, but it's unusual for somebody to stick their car keys in the freezer.
Yes, I would say that's not typical.
Yeah. And then we had the only other real paranormal event was one of my in-laws would wake up with scratches.
In the same house?
No, in his house.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But it was in a place where he couldn't reach. It was right in the middle of his back.
Now, what time period was this? Was this around
during the same time period? Yeah.
Interesting.
There were at least 3 times where we went and visited them for like a weekend. And he would come out and he goes, "Oh yeah, my visitor came by again last night." But it would happen even if we weren't there. Right.
It's not like it was following you guys specifically there and then it was happening.
Right. But this was a serious scratch. I mean, it was nasty. It would welt up. I bet it would be a welt the size of the old-fashioned, not the current, but the old-fashioned, almost the old-fashioned fun-size Snicker bars.
Really?
With the open cut in the middle of it, right? Like the cut would be thin.
Right.
And you can see where it would have been bleeding, but the welt on that thing would be at least like that.
Wow. So a good inch or so wide.
Yes.
Wow.
Right in the right here, like right in the middle of his back.
Impossible for you.
It was hard to do in your sleep.
Right. Wow.
And he was a physician, so
right. So he would know if he self-inflicted something,
right.
And I'm sure he was a pretty rationally minded person where it wouldn't be like him to just automatically jump to, oh, well, this is some kind of weird activity.
Yeah.
But still, he accepted that, given the evidence at hand, this is what it had to be.
Right.
So, awesome. Well, Mike, I appreciate you sharing your stories with us, man. That is so cool. And we talked about getting together and doing this episode of the podcast for a while, and I hope the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did. It was even better knowing the stories that you had going in. I knew a few of them, but the end result is so much better than even I could have ever imagined. So I really appreciate you doing that, man.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And guys, that's going to end it for this week's episode of True Paranormal. Be sure to join us next week for another great episode of True Paranormal, the podcast.